welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Thailand's suspended Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra is now facing an anti-graft probe over alleged ethics violations linked to the earlier leaked phone call with Cambodia's former leader Hun Sen, according to local media. The 38-year-old, already suspended by the Constitutional Court, now faces mounting pressure. Indian Foreign Minister Subrahmanyam Jaishankar has told Chinese counterpart Wang Yi that resolving border friction and maintaining peace are crucial for mutual trust between India and China, according to media reports, while he also said both countries have made good progress in normalizing ties over the past 9 months. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met with U.S. Special Envoy Keith Kellogg in Kyiv to discuss strengthening the air defenses and weapons procurement, with European support, according to media reports. The talks came a day after President Donald Trump promised Patriot missiles for Ukraine. Air India CEO Campbell Wilson has urged staff not to draw premature conclusions about last month's deadly crash in Ahmedabad, India. His memo followed a preliminary report detailing cockpit confusion and fuel switches being flipped before the Boeing Dreamliner went down, killing 260 people. President Donald Trump says the U.S. will send various pieces of very sophisticated military equipment to Ukraine, including Patriot missile defense systems. Trump again voiced frustration with Vladimir Putin, saying he talks nice and then he bombs everybody in the evening, while Kyiv warns offensive weapons may also be included. The G20's financial stability watchdog released a new plan on Monday to tackle climate risks, but paused further policy work as the U.S. pulls back. Washington's exit from key groups studying climate impacts on financial stability has been tested global unity on climate-related policy. President Trump says he hopes to get the Gaza situation straightened out in the next week, while his envoy Witkoff confirmed he will meet senior Qatari officials in New Jersey on Sunday. Witkoff added that he's hopeful about making progress on ceasefire negotiations to end the ongoing conflict. Russia's local administration said on Monday that Ukrainian drones attacked a training center at the Russia-held Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant using 3 UAVs. The administration claimed there was no critical damage, while Reuters have reported that it could not independently verify this report. Air India's CEO has issued an internal memo sharing key updates on this investigation into the recent crash of a Boeing 787-28 in Ahmedabad. The CEO stressed that the probe remains far from over and urged against premature conclusions, noting that the preliminary report did not identify a definite cause or issue any safety recommendations. The CEO has confirmed that the flight crew cleared all mandatory breathalyzer and medical checks, with no issues found in the fuel quality or takeoff roll. The preliminary findings also ruled out mechanical or maintenance failures, easing concerns about the aircraft's condition. Air India has already inspected its entire Boeing 787 fleet, declaring them safe for service. Meanwhile, India's aviation regulator DGCA is expected to mandate checks on the fuel switch locking mechanism across all Boeing 787 aircraft after reports of unintended switch movement between cutoff and run modes. Now we're joined by Captain Kishore Chinta. He's an aviation safety expert and former military aviator. Thank you, Captain, for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. Can you please explain the significance of this fuel switch locking mechanism in this aircraft, and why the DGCA is focusing on it now?
Thank you for having me on your channel. The fuel cutoff switches primarily activate the start logic. The moment you turn them to on position, it gives a signal to the electronic engine control, which activates the start logic to the fuel metering unit, the FADIC, and a whole lot of other sensors. So that's the relevance of these switches. When you turn it to cutoff, it's the same way. It's giving a signal to the electronic engine control, further to the fuel metering unit, to the fuel shutoff valves, and so on and so forth. These are guarded by guardrails on the side, and the switches as such are so designed that there is a lock mechanism, which is basically a physical lock, and the switch is spring loaded. So you have to pull it out of the catch, move it over the lock mechanism, and move it to the next position. So, can this be done uncommanded? A possibility which cannot be ruled out because these switches are just a mechanical movement. They provide just an electric signal. And on the flight data recorder and as well as in the report, all that they mention is transition from on to cutoff and cutoff to on. That's exactly what the flight data recorder would be recording. It would be recording the electric pulse which is generated by these switches. There has to be deliberation on whether these movements were commanded by either of the pilots or uncommanded by either of the pilots. And unfortunately, the preliminary report is very sketchy in terms of event-based representation of all the facts and figures, wherein the flight data recorder against a timestamp is paraphrased and superimposed with the cockpit voice recorder recordings in terms of ECAM warnings, EICAS warnings, interactions between both the pilots, other cockpit sounds. All these would have probably given us a more detailed insight into why, what, and how. And why the investigation is focusing on these switches is that that is the primary cause that the fuel to the engines was cut off, which caused the engines to start spooling back, which caused loss of lift on the aircraft, eventually leading to the aircraft impacting the ground. That is the importance of these switches, and that is why they focus on why, what, and how as far as the investigation is going to progress.
And Captain, now looking at broader picture, what role does the aviation regulator DGCA play in this ensuring aircraft safety after incidents like this?
As of now, there is no recommendations by the AIB in the preliminary report, neither to the aircraft manufacturer or the DGCA as far as any safety recommendations is concerned. But the DGCA has been on an overdrive in terms of safety oversight or 360 degrees safety oversight by conducting various audits on all the aircraft operators, the MROs, doing a very thorough audit on the processes of each and every operator to see if there has been any lapse as far as the operators in terms of following the laid down protocols, the regulations, and other requirements is concerned. DGCA will be doing its own in-depth analysis on the airline operator Air India, whether there were any loopholes on their safety mechanism, the safety management system, whether they are being followed absolutely to the hilt or not. That will be, I'm sure they will be doing the needful.
And Captain, what procedures are in place for mandatory crew checks like breathalyzer and medical tests before flights? Is there anything else as well?
Unlike most parts of the world, when a pilot joins a new operator, in-depth drug sensitivity test analysis, a narcotic test is mandatory. which includes practically every single aspect of drug testing. And also in India, breath analyzer test is 100% mandatory before each flight, unlike most other countries. So, and also our tolerance levels for the breath analyzer is 0.000. That is zero tolerance. Even if you have 0.0001 in the breath analyzer, you will be suspended for 3 months and you will lose your license.
Okay, and Captain, how does this preliminary report that has come out shape the ongoing investigation despite not providing a definitive cause?
The prime cause of why, what, and how is definitely been identified, that the engines lost power. That the speculation part on the flaps and undercarriage and bird head and engine stall, all that goes out of the window, and we know that the engines lost power primarily because uh, something caused those switches to go from on to cut off. At what stage, what altitude, uh, those are still not very clear because the photograph which is there in the preliminary report vis-a-vis the event-based and the cockpit voice recorder recordings is not very elaborately portrayed in the report. But it will be investigated, I'm sure, in depth on why these switches moved. Is there a possibility that they can be moved uncommanded? Uh, can electric fault or electrical fault or a software glitch or fault in the FADEC or any other aspect which may have caused this to happen? Those will be deliberated upon. There will be the physiological and psychological aspects which will definitely be dwelled upon, which has been brought out on various forums, whether the pilots were not just well rested, but also what was their fatigue level over the previous 30 days, how many flights, how many night flights, the family history, everything will be looked into. But that should not have a bearing on their fitness to fly. So the investigation definitely will be progressing, as they mentioned in the aspects as far as airworthiness, the the in-depth analysis of why these switches went from cut off to off. All those aspects will be very detailedly investigated upon, and I'm sure the final report will have a more definitive cause on why, what, and how.
Thank you very much, Captain Kishore Chinta, for joining us today as an aviation safety expert and former military aviator. Now we move on to our next news. An Indian delegation has reached Washington to hold a fresh round of talks on the bilateral trade agreement. With the US, the talks are likely to focus on agriculture, automobiles, and tariffs. The four-day discussions are expected to shape a potential interim deal on tariffs. The trade talks are paramount. It is also important as the US has further postponed the imposition of additional tariffs on several countries, including India, until August 1st. Earlier this month, the Indian team was in Washington for talks with negotiations taking place from June 26 to July 2nd. The team has once again reached the US for negotiations now. India has hardened its position on the US demand for duty concessions and on agriculture and dairy products. India is now aiming for the following. It's seeking the removal of this additional 26% tariff. It is also seeking the easing of tariffs on steel and aluminum, which is over 50%. And now the 25% on auto sectors as well. Against these, India has reserved its right under the WTO norms to impose retaliatory duties. US President Donald Trump announced heavy tariffs on a number of countries, including India, on April 2nd. However, it was soon postponed for 90 days until July 9th, and later now to August 1st. Meanwhile, conundrum over a fair deal between United States and EU continue to intensify. While US has imposed a 30% tariff on EU still hopes to strike a deal with the United States, delaying countermeasures. Now we're joined by John Rosumando. He's a president of Viking Research Associates and a geopolitical analyst, joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you, John, for joining us today. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. From a geopolitical perspective, how might the outcome of these second India-US trade talk impact broader strategic relations between these two countries?
Well, the United States and India have had a mixed relationship in recent years. The Biden administration wanted to, work with better relations with China, and the Indians felt, pushed to the back. It's going to be a rather, difficult time for the U.S. and India because the U.S. needs India against China, but at the same time, President Trump's desire to impose these tariffs has strained relations. So I think that it's a very difficult situation for both countries right now.
John, how do tariff disputes like these reflect the current trends in global trade policies and protectionism?
Well, the rise of populism in Western countries, has brought about the desire to bring about tariffs. There's a strong sense in the United States that we've allowed our industrial base to be whittled away by going to countries like India, China, places in Southeast Asia, and there's a need to protect American goods and American industry by imposing these tariffs.
And John, building on that, in your analysis, what are the potential implications for regional economic stability if these trade negotiations between India and the US face prolonged challenges?
Well, if they face prolonged challenges, it could result in India looking for other markets outside of the U.S. and to whether it's like Europe or the Middle East or other places in Asia. I think you could see a sort of rebalancing of trade priorities.
And thank you. And how has the U.S. timeline for imposing additional tariffs in India and other countries evolved recently?
Well, I think that the president has looked to countries like Argentina and with whom President Trump has a strong relation with President Milei there and has agreed to reduce tariffs. But I think that the president really wants to use this to open the rest of the world to American goods and products that he believes are not getting a fair shrift in the global market.
And is there any sector that maybe, or any upper hand or some cards that India can play out for these trade negotiations?
Well, I think that if India were to agree to allow more American goods into the Indian market, I think that would be seen as a positive step by President Trump and his team.
Yes, and what are the key sectors under this discussion in the current India-US? What are the key sections in this current bilateral trade talks?
The current trade talks, agricultural goods, the industrial, and other.
Thank you very much, John, for joining us today and sharing that insight. Now we move on to our next news. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to offer the role of Prime Minister to Yulia Sviridenko, currently serving as First Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economy. A key meeting between Zelensky and Sviridenko is scheduled for tomorrow to discuss a new cabinet structure. If he is appointed, Sviridenko would replace current Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal, who is now being considered for the role of Defense Minister, potentially succeeding Rustem Umerov, who may become Ukraine's ambassador to the United States. Other possible candidates for Defense Minister include Interior Minister Denis Kylimenko and Digital Transformation Minister Mikhailo Fedorov. While Sviridenko has publicly denied receiving a formal letter or offer, sources close to the president confirmed that she is the top contender to lead the government. Now we're joined by retired Major General Sudhakarji, and he as a senior geopolitical and strategic defense expert. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. What is your reaction about the shakeup in Ukrainian cabinet, according to you?
Good evening, Asuma. Thank you so much for getting me to the show. Very brief background. There have been lots of cases of corruption in Ukraine some time back, and this is a method, ongoing process to cleanse the system. This is one. And second is the willing participation of the soldiers. It's showing very serious fault lines. They have had too many casualties. The war has been going on, and very mindful of the losses that are being inflicted. And third and most important thing is that the leadership, Mr. Zelensky, who actually is a comedian, he has been trying his best to marshal support, international support for the war against Russia. And despite all this, Ukraine has had a very serious onslaught of attacks by Russian forces in recent past, post, I would say, Operation Spider Web, which was 4,500 kilometers deep inside Russia sometime in the month of June. And the war has been intensifying, and the supply of arms, ammunition, warlike stores, which had been suspended by America for some time, they also have been restored rather by Donald Trump. So under these circumstances, because of a kind of unending reportage of corruption by lots of people in the system, this particular purging activity, I won't call it a purging, the removal of the leadership in the hierarchy based on their performance, their transparency, accountability, and more than anything else, is the righteousness in the behavior is actually being factored in to carry out cleansing of the system. Last but not the least, the war is being extended for sure. I am not seeing any signs of ceasefire coming the way between Russia and Ukraine. The peace effort which is being made by Donald Trump and the allied parties looks like Ukraine is for a very hard time, because as per my assessment, Russia is unlikely to pull back because the geopolitical cost is going to be prohibitive for Putin to do the same. Although it is going through a hard time equally, yet it has been able to sustain the challenges, stand up to the challenges, revive the economy. By far, the Russian economy as of today is doing pretty well in comparison with the European Union and the American economy. Back to Asun.
And Major General, according to your experience and background, what qualities and experience are important for someone to lead the defense ministry in a country at war, looking at this Ukraine situation?
Well, very good question, Asuma. The first and foremost thing we are taught in the military forces is that the country comes first, always and every time. And when you have people who lack loyalty to the leadership, that is the first thing, actually, is not a selection but a rejection criteria. The second and most important thing is when you are leading a group of troops who are in the middle of a conflict, the connect with the troops on ground is very, very important. If the connect is not there, if the person or the leadership is only office bound and not going on the ground to listen to the problems, address the issues, the challenges the troops are facing on the ground, it actually works as a counterproductive parameter for a selection of a candidate for a very serious role. And third and most important thing is the ability, the hallmark of such leaders lies in the fact that he should be able to anticipate which direction the conflict is actually heading to. And as per my assessment, with the basic fundamentals which are available in the open source, the conflict is not likely to end very soon. Therefore, the country must prepare in catering for all the warlike stores, long range, short range, medium range, all kinds of weapons, the ammunition, and the criticalities which are actually facing not only the military population, the civilians. Last but not the least is to ability in such kind of situations, the civil environment goes through lots of turbulent phases wherein they are subjected to, a kind of agitation that may turn out to be disastrous and very, very detrimental to the overall sanctity and stability of the country. So these are a couple of issues I have shared with you. It is economic, it is military in nature, it is political stability, and above all, the will to fight a battle and win the war.
Thank you very much, retired Major General Sudhakarji, for joining us today and sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we move on to our next news. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met with U.S. envoy John Kellogg in Kyiv today. They discussed critical issues including enhancing Ukraine's air defense capabilities and potential weapons purchases from European nations. Zelensky emphasized the importance of continuing sanctions on Russia to further pressure Moscow. The talks highlight growing international cooperation as Ukraine strengthens its defense against Russian aggression. Zelensky called for more support to ensure Ukraine's security and sovereignty amid ongoing conflict. He also thanked Trump for all his messages and decisions. Let's have a look at what the Ukrainian president had to say.
We are thankful to President Trump for his all messages and very strong decisions about resuming delivers for us, and we are thankful for bipartisan support. And of course, we had very good conversations in Hague, and we had with President, and we had very good phone conversation. We made some decisions very positive for both countries, and just now we spoke about air defense with General.
Now we're joined by Major General retired Sudhakarji for our guest discussion. Thank you for staying with us. What are the main topics that we can maybe guess about this discussion during President Zelensky's meeting with U.S. envoy John Kellogg in Kyiv?
Asubam, in my opinion, the main points for discussion would be the restoration of the supply chain of the hardware, particularly the air defense support system. That is the first and foremost thing, because as on today, the Patriots are far and few. They are already committed on the ground, particularly in Europe. And America's second line or the production capability in the defense industry is yet to pick up momentum, which will sustain the demands on the ground. One. Number two, there is also points for discussion, in my opinion, how best to impose sanctions in effective manner against Russia so that it does not have the sustainable wherewithal, whether it is economic or the political willpower and the resolve to continue with the fight against Ukraine. And third and most important thing is basically strategizing the Ukrainian military options available for standing up to the ongoing challenges being posed by Russia. It all triggered with, in my opinion, it was all going like a typical conflict. However, the Operation Spiderweb had changed the overall dynamics, in my opinion, and so much so penetrating well deep into Russian territory by 4,500 kilometers, destroying more than 40 strategic bombers by the drones and the swarm drones. This itself has been a very act of premeditated plan and orchestration of very serious offensive action. And therefore, Russia has actually gone hammer and tong to give it back to Ukraine. In my opinion, this operation is unlikely to come to any kind of a temporary pause. It will continue in the same manner. Last but not the least, the European Union, who have been left in a lurch by flip-flop decision of the USA, that they would be fighting the battle, defending themselves, raising the defense expenditure to 5% by 2035. They have been willy-nilly wanting USA to reconcile and get back to the previous standpoint so that along with the European Union, there is a united fight and support given to the Ukraine. And to me, it appears that European Union, for the time being, they have been successful to get Donald Trump back on the track in support to Ukraine. And how this particular support can actually fructify, although there are statements in the open media coming that Donald Trump is not going to pay for the air defense systems which are going to be provided to Ukraine to protect itself, but it's a matter of economics and details. In principle, Donald Trump has agreed to support Ukraine for the time being, but whether it will carry on till eternity is a matter which time will tell. Back to you, Asun.
Thank you for sharing that, Major General retired Sudhakarji. You will stay with us as we stay on this topic. Russia's top military officer, Valery Gerasimov, has inspected frontline troops in eastern Ukraine as fighting intensifies around Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region. According to Russia's defense ministry, Gerasimov reviewed battlefield updates from commanders of the center group of forces and assessed operations during his visit. The key area, a key focus in Moscow's push to control Donetsk, is seeing heavy clashes. A video posted on Telegram showed Gerasimov arriving by military helicopter and meeting officers on the ground. Russia now controls around 19% of Ukraine's internationally recognized territory, including Crimea and most of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson regions. Now we go back to our guest discussion with retired Major General Sudhakarji. He's a senior geopolitical and strategic defense expert. Thank you for staying with us. Now, how does an inspection by a top military officer like Gerasimov typically influence frontline troop morale and operational command based on your experience?
Morale and motivation is a matter of connect between the leaders, right, on the top and with the troops who are fighting on the ground. And most such kind of meetings during the ongoing conflict will definitely inject that stimulus of high spirit and the will to dedicate oneself for the success or the victory in the war. So plus understanding the grassroots problems will be far, far better when the leadership on the top goes down to the grassroots level, tries to apply himself, speak to the troops, get first-hand information, analyze, take a feedback, and so as to, it's called a OODA loop, observe, orient, uh, uh, detect, direct, and act. So in order to connect all these 5 components, there is a feedback loop which is injected, and it is passing back the information or directions right up to the political level for quick response so as to fortify the troops who are deployed on the ground. Last but not the least is the very important issue. It is the phase of the operation and what lies ahead. It is to prepare the troops for the unforeseen eventualities, the contingencies, tell them the pros and cons, the pluses and minuses of every option available, and also be with them in times of criticality so as to make them stronger and enhance the self-confidence in the troops on the ground as also the leadership in the intermediate and at the tactical level. And all these, unless the defense hardware is actually supported and supply chain is extended in a sustainable manner, perhaps the end state will not be achieved. The end state, as I see, is to continue to retain the land bridge between the Donbas region and the Crimea, which Ukraine will always try to snatch it back from Russia, and Russia will always try to defend it to the hilt and not give it back to Ukraine. Crimea, in any case, Russia is not going to surrender that easily. For me, it is a very, very strong red light as far as Russia is concerned, and therefore, worse can be expected when Ukraine, duly supported by USA and the NATO forces or the European Union and UK, if they try to support Ukraine to take back Crimea, that may be a kind of a turning point in the entire conflict. And that willy-nilly is going to demonstrate how effectively Russia is holding out along the eastern flank of Ukraine. And mind you, it is in 7 layers of defenses, not one or layer. And there are a couple of communication centers which actually forbid Russian forces. If these communication centers are lost out, then the logistic bases are going to be disrupted and the supply chain is going to be broken in between, thereby causing very hardship and maybe deprivation to the troops on the ground. So therefore, these are the couple of issues which a senior commander would always like to go on ground, see on troops and prepare them for the worst eventuality.
Yes.
Last but not the least, the worst is coming. If the supply of arms, ammunition, hardware is not stopped by USA and the European countries to Ukraine, there is no end to the sight of ceasefire in any form. The conflict will continue. God only knows till when.
Yes. Thank you very much, Major General Sudhakarji, for joining us today and sharing your insight as a retired Major General. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. Now we have a breaking news. At least 89 people have been killed in intense clashes between Druze fighters and Sunni Bedouin tribes in Syria's southern Sueda province, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. The monitor reported that the dead included 46 Druze fighters, 18 Bedouin fighters, 4 civilians from Sueda, 14 members of Syria's security forces, and 7 unidentified individuals in military uniforms. Syria's government has deployed security forces to contain the escalating violence, which has marked one of the deadliest outbreaks in the region in recent years. Now we're joined by Rohan Gunaratna. He's an international affairs expert joining us live from Singapore. Thank you, Rohan, for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. What measures are generally taken by governments to stabilize regions experiencing such intense violence?
Asuma, the Syrian regime led by Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, known as Abu Shara, he has dispatched his fighters, mostly from the group called the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham that has formed now the Syrian government. These troops have gone to the Druze region. That region is in the north of Israel, south of Syria. It is a part of the Syrian territory. And of course, they have fought with the Druze because the Syrian regime, the new Syrian regime, wants to take control of the Druze territory. And the Druze don't want these Syrian Islamists to come there because wherever the Islamists went, they disrupted the churches and they disrupted the Shia practices. And now, of course, they want to disrupt the Druze because they want to spread Islamism, which is a political form of Islam. And they don't want that. They want to continue with their traditional ways. And of course, the Israel government, the Israeli authorities are supporting the Druze, and Israel will continue to assist and even step up assistance to the Druze because the death of those Druze is a matter of concern for Israel. Israel has always been very friendly and very good to the Druze. So Israel will protect the community of Druze in Syria because of the traditional alignment and the friendship between the Druze and the Jews.
And Rohan, what are the typical challenges faced by security forces when deployed to contain such violent clashes?
What we have seen is that since Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, alias Abu Shara, became president, he has used his own group called Hayat Tahrir al-Sham to go and quell the uprising and the resistance of the Shia. He has also done that with the Christians, and now he is doing with the Druze. So he is an Islamist. He wants to impose Sharia Islam or Islamic law. And of course, Syria should never be a place where Sharia Islam is practiced because Syria is a place where there are non-Muslims also. So it is in the strategic interests of the Muslim leaders to advise Abu Shara not to do that, but to have a secular state where there is peace and stability and security for all communities, all ethnic groups and all religious groups.
Thank you, Rohan Gunaratna. You please stay with us as we move on to our next news. Now, sectarian clashes have flared again in Syria's Druze majority city of Suwaida, leaving 6 security personnel dead, according to a defense ministry source. Monday's fighting involved and followed by a deadly outbreak of violence over the weekend between Druze militiamen and Bedouin tribal fighters that killed at least 30 people. Syrian security forces were deployed to calm the situation and provide safe passage for civilians, but local outlet Suwaida 24 has reported the resumption of heavy clashes. The violence marks the first sectarian bloodshed inside the city itself after months of tension. Officials blame the absence of state institutions and kidnappings, including that of a Druze merchant. For triggering the unrest, complicating matters, Israel has rejected any Syrian military presence south of Damascus, fueling uncertainty in the region. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Rohan Gunaratna. He's an international affairs expert. Thank you, Rohan, for staying with us. What challenges do security forces typically face when deployed to such with suburban areas or urban areas?
So south of Damascus is where the Druze live, and that is where the Druze do not want Syrian forces to come, because the Syrian forces are basically an Islamist group called Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and wherever they went, they brutally murdered and killed and destroyed other settlements and other communities. So Israel has now given a very clear warning to the Syrian leadership not to deploy south of Damascus. And the Syrian regime has done that. So it is very likely that in the coming days, the coming weeks, and the coming months, that Israel will intervene to ensure that south of Damascus will be a zone where the Syrian troops are not deployed, because Israel do not want Abu Shara's groups, meaning the Syrian security forces, to be deployed in that area, because Israel perceives that as a threat because of their past of being very closely associated with ISIS or the Islamic State group.
Thank you, Rohan, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we stay in the region. Iran has warned it will respond to any attempt to reimpose United Nations sanctions over its nuclear program. The threat comes amid growing tensions with European powers who say they may trigger the snapback mechanism under the 2015 nuclear deal if no agreement is reached to protect their security interests. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson Ismail Baghei has said the move would be met with proportionate response but did not specify the details. He also accused European signatories of violating their commitments under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, claiming they lack the legal standing to use the mechanism. The snapback option could reinstate UN sanctions that were lifted in exchange for curbs on Iran's nuclear activity. Western nations believe Iran is advancing towards a nuclear weapon, a charge Tehran strongly denies. Let's listen in to what the Foreign Ministry of Tehran had to say.
فعلا در این خصوص هیچ تاریخی، زمانی، مکانی تعیین نشده. در مورد سوالتون راجع به تعدد میانجیگران، نه اینجور نیست. ببینید در طی 3-4 ماه گذشته خیلی از کشورهای دوست، کشورهای منطقه یا حتی خارج از منطقه تلاش کردند مساعی جمیله‌شون رو به کار بگیرند برای حل موضوع هسته‌ای و اون چیزی که مد نظر ماست و اولویت اصلی ماست، رفع تحریم‌های.
Now we go back to our guest discussion with an international affairs expert, Rohan Gannaratne. Thank you, Rohan, for staying with us. What are the potential security implications for the region if the UN reimposes sanctions on Iran under this snapback mechanism?
The European countries are very determined to impose these sanctions. In fact, the German Chancellor, together with 2 other European countries, that is UK and France, they are planning to propose to the UN Security Council next Tuesday that these sanctions are imposed. It is because Iran has in many ways said something and done something else. They are enriching uranium to build a functional nuclear weapon. And no country wants Iran to have a functional nuclear weapon, because Iran has been sponsoring terrorism, has been empowering so many terrorist groups with weapons, with training, with finance and direction. So at this point, the international community is opposed to the idea of Iran building those nuclear capabilities, because the Ayatollah regime in Iran cannot be trusted, because they say something and do something. And of course, Israel and the United States will again bomb Iran. In fact, today, the Iranian airspace was totally cleared, and that was in preparation for a missile attack by Iran. So Iran will also fight back. They will also strike at any country that attacks them. So I want to say that the Middle East is going back to war. But what is important is that at this point, the Europeans are trying their best to persuade Iran to agree to certain measures so that Iran will abandon its nuclear program, its program to enrich uranium.
Thank you, Rohan Ganaratna, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we stay in the region. For the first time since the Gaza war began in October 2023, Israeli and Palestinian foreign ministers are attending the same high-level event, a European Union summit with southern neighbors in Brussels. Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar is expected to hold talks with EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas and other senior officials, but the Palestinian Authority has denied reports that Sa'ar will meet his Palestinian counterpart, Warsan Agabekian Shaheen. Shaheen is set to deliver a strong speech condemning what she calls Israel's genocide and displacement campaign in Gaza and the military crackdown in the West Bank. She'll also meet several EU foreign ministers demanding a halt to the war and renewed peace talks. Israel's delegation has not commented on the Palestinian remarks. The event comes amid EU calls for de-escalation and urgent humanitarian relief in the region. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Rohan Ganaratna. He's an international affairs expert. Thank you, Rohan, for staying with us. Now, what is the significance of both Israeli and Palestinian foreign ministers attending the same EU summit for the first time since the Gaza conflict began? Can we finally expect any efforts for peace in Gaza?
Yes, this is a great opportunity because eventually Gaza will not be ruled by Israel, but will be ruled by the Palestinian Authority. And Israel should work with the Palestinian Authority and ensure that Gaza has no Hamas, no Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and no other terrorist groups. So to move from a phase of war to a phase of political negotiations and discussions is paramount. So on Monday in Brussels, both the Israeli and the Palestinian ministers will meet with their counterparts in Brussels, and that will be a golden opportunity for both these parties to talk to each other. What is important is that every military operation should have a strategic, a political, and a diplomatic gain. So these talks are imperative to restore and maintain future stability, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank.
Thank you very much, Rohan Ganaratna, for staying with us throughout our news and sharing your insight. Now we have another breaking news. 4 people have died after a small plane crashed in a fireball at Southend Airport in the UK yesterday. The incident, which occurred just before 4 p.m., involved a 12-meter aircraft operated by Dutch company Zurich Aviation. The airport has been closed until further notice. Essex police confirmed the incident as serious and said emergency crews rushed to the scene. Images shared on social media showed massive flames and black smoke billowing from the site. Now we're joined by Joshua Barnes. He's an anchor and correspondent at NewsX World. Joshua, what more can you tell us about this recent incident in UK?
Well, yes, absolutely, Asuma. An extremely tragic situation where we now know that 4 people have lost their lives. These are initial reports, and we expect a police briefing at 3 p.m. BST, confirming that 4 people were on board this small plane that crashed in Essex, United Kingdom, at the airport London Southend, which is a very small airport but does have international flights. This type of plane is often used for transportation of organs or cargo. It's very rare that it's used for passengers. It can hold up to 12 people. We now know that 4 people were on board. That includes what we believe to be 2 pilots as well. Further information about the casualties will come soon, but this another tragic incident with a plane crashing shortly after takeoff. We of course had the recent devastating Ahmedabad Air India crash, which of course killed over 260 people. The loss of life is not on this scale at the Southend Airport in the United Kingdom. There's still a tragic moment and a thorough investigation will be underway, and we expect a preliminary report within around a month and then a final report after all of the relevant data has been accessed, reviewed. But a very tragic day, not just for those loved ones of the 4 people that have died, but also for a lot of people who are looking to go travelling. The airport has closed down for the foreseeable future, so massive ramifications on people with summer plans, but the main overriding thought is the sadness and of course the hopes and prayers for the families of those 4 who died on board.
Thank you, Joshua Barnes, for sharing that insight. Now we move on to our next news. According to reports, nearly 2/3 of lawyers in a key U.S. Justice Department unit have resigned or plan to leave amid mounting pressure to defend controversial Trump administration's policies. The federal programs branch tasked with defending executive actions like restricting birthright citizenship and slashing funds to Harvard has seen 69 of its roughly 110 lawyers exit. Reports also state that the former DOJ attorneys cite ethical concerns, political pressure, and exhaustion from an unprecedented wave of legal battles. Many feared being forced to misrepresent facts or defend legally dubious policies. The departures have left the department scrambling temporarily, reassessing lawyers and bringing in a record number of political appointees. Attorney General Pam Bondi warned lawyers in February that they must align with Trump's agenda or face consequences, deepening concerns over ethical violations and political interference in the legal system. Now we're joined by Joshua Barnes. He's anchor and correspondent at NewsX World. Joshua, why is this work significant? What more can you tell us about the shuffling in the cabinet in U.S.?
Well, yes, Asuma, to put it simply, it seems that people are leaving because of the controversy around the legal process of many of Donald Trump's policies. A lot of his key policies have had legal challenges. A lot of these lawyers in departments challenging the government, and it seems that there is high discontent among those working in these departments. It is, of course, a difficult situation. Donald Trump was very clear when he came into office what his goals and aims were, looking to pass legislation, looking to change laws in certain circumstances to make sure that his policies can move forward. Ultimately, Donald Trump was elected by the American people, but of course there wasn't a clear majority. He won the presidential election. He also won the Senate and the House as well to have a clean sweep. But there are a lot of people that don't support Donald Trump, and a lot of people who are in these departments, and lots of lawyers who have served over many presidencies. So it does show you the dividing nature of Trump's policies and also the legal action that has been taken. I don't expect this to be a conversation that goes away. We know that several claims against Trump's policies are continuing to be put in, but ultimately Trump is pushing forward in his goals and his aims set out during his campaigning and now in the first period of his second term in office.
Thank you, Joshua, for sharing that insight. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.